Okay, you apologize this time.
Okay. Um, I'm going to wait till somebody's commented before I start
No,
talking.
let's just start.
Okay. So, what's going to happen is, since we've never had this problem with Zoom, is if it cuts out again, then what we're going to do is do this again at 4 o'clock tomorrow.
But
But
we'll do it on Zoom and we'll give everybody a Zoom link.
yeah, and we've just never had that problem. And yeah. So,
It's got to be our cable. We had a big storm today,
yeah,
and
I
our
don't know. I never have this problem with Zoom, even with during storms. But so I'm not sure that if Zuckerberg did it to us or
we'll
Elon got in there.
we'll do it with Zoom tomorrow. We'll redo this and
I
we'll
mean, we'll finish today
yeah.
if we can make it. But if it cuts out or buffers one more time, then I'm just going to post that we're doing it tomorrow at 4. And I hope that that's okay with you guys. But we'll record it and provide a link so it'll work out the same. Anyway, so we were talking about the
Bond for
bond for
D.
deed, and really it shouldn't even be on the list of conveyances because all it is a contract to convey 5 years from now or whenever you've paid it off, whatever the terms are, up to 10 years. And you can't do a bond for deed for longer than that. It's not very advantageous to someone. I guess it's okay if you have zero money and your only way to eventually own a house is to rent it in the meantime. But um, you have so few rights and so few
Mm.
protections in that situation that I wouldn't advise you do it. But I could see them giving you a scenario where they just describe a fact pattern, and if it looks like the transfer hasn't been made, but it's just some kind of future effect of property ownership, then go for bond for deed.
It may be hard to distinguish in the moment between a credit sale and a bond for deed. So watch out for that because the seller is not walking away with 100% cash with either one of those. So see if the sale has been completed or if the sale is not going to be completed for a few years. The
Mm-hmm.
buyer's not going to own the home right away.
Right. So if they say a contract has been signed, but don't tell you that the property has changed ownership, then they're fooling you into thinking, oh, they completed the contract. All they've done is agreed in the future that there will be an ownership transfer.
Okay. And another way to convey property without any kind of mortgage at all or any kind of rights at all is a quit claim deed, which, if you've been paying attention to the news in Louisiana or in the New Orleans area, I don't know if you're from out of town or not, is the quit claim deed. And that is just a document that assigns rights that you may or may not have to a particular piece of property.
Yeah, so I think of it as very much like my analogy is, and I don't know if it works for you, but similar to a copyright. If you're not sure that you own the copyright to a book because you may have inherited it or it may have been sold in the past, but nobody has any paperwork anymore, but you want to sell or even assign the rights to the book you might have written or inherited to someone else, but you can't guarantee you even own it. So they're basically buying the possibility that you own it. You would use a quit claim contract. Similarly with land, you may not know where the fence line is, but you both want to just kind of confirm or settle or quit the claim and just end the dispute and say, well, I don't know if I own this strip of land, but if I do, I'm giving it to you. And so that's technically what a quitclaim is, which is a transfer of whatever rights I might have without the what is it called, warranty of good.
Warranty of title, warranty of any kind of warranty.
Right. You're
There are
not.
no warranties.
You're just so people use it in New Orleans to try to avoid taxes, to do a donation, but disguise it. They're never going to on the exam kind of teach you how to evade the normal way. So the only reason you would use a quit claim is if you weren't going to warranty title or they told you that they weren't sure whether they still possessed that lake or something like that. Then it's just they're begging for you to say, well, then a quit claim would be a good way to deal with that. Other than that, though, quit claim's not going to come
Do
up
they
on the
test
exam.
often on that?
I don't think they. I have. I think they tested once in the last 3 years on it, but it's again just to acknowledge that if they didn't have that clause in an active sale, that said we warranty good title, then they're telling you it's a quitclaim, whether the title said quitclaim or not, because a sale, a requirement of an actual sale or a credit sale, would be that you warranty good title. And if
That's the only, without any other language, that's the only thing that is warranted in a sale. If you warrant,
that the roof won't leak or
right,
something like that, all of that's optional.
the
But
redibatory defects, you
yeah,
know.
but the one thing that a cash sale will always have, so they could give you a library document where the sale, whatever it's labeled, has a warranty of good title, and then you're supposed to recognize that it is not a quitclaim. Or if that's missing in a long library document, you're supposed to figure out it's a quitclaim.
Another type of conveyance that, well, okay, let's talk quickly about one more that's a mortgage. Just super quick because it's a very complex mortgage and it's conventional. It's a collateral mortgage, and a collateral mortgage is something that investors use a lot. It encompasses a conventional mortgage, but it's a big package. It's got four pieces to it, to the transaction.
And we decided we're not going to get into like what the kind of details of it is, but the key is the difference between a conventional mortgage and then a collateral mortgage.
So a collateral mortgage is one document that most likely an investor, a property investor, would use. He or she would take out an overarching mortgage, and then he would add and take out notes on individual pieces of property. Those are the hand notes. I think the book calls them little hand notes. So let's say he wants to buy a piece of property here and a piece of property there and another piece of property. Every time he buys a piece of property, he would do a new note, and then he would, pay off that piece of property, and they would give him back the note and mark it paid.
Still all based on that original collateral mortgage.
So it's an interesting document, and I'm not sure.
So instead of taking out lots of new mortgages to upgrade your house, put in a pool, buy extra property, buy the lot next door, you've kind of already decided in advance with the financing company that you could do that. You don't have to, but it's like a line of credit that's just sitting there waiting to be used.
But it's not a line of credit.
No, it's a Louisiana old style version of what now anybody would do as a line of credit. So I don't even know why they continue to test on it and all that, because I doubt any banks use this much anymore. Well,
people
for the big financing that you're talking about, yeah.
So if I'm an investor and I go and I buy, a lot on this house, a street, and then I buy a lot on that street, and I buy a lot on that street, and then I sell this one lot, the bank doesn't have to redo my mortgage 3 different times. They only have to redo one mortgage and one note, because a mortgage is going to have a note attached to it. The note is what's valuable. The note is what can be sold and traded, which gets...
It's a little more liquid than the contract, which is a mortgage. But we just wanted to point out the main conceptual difference between a conventional mortgage, the kind you usually use to just buy a house, and this collateral mortgage, which you can think of as like a line of credit, but it's the civil law way of doing that existed before there were such things as HELOCs or lines of credit. And they occasionally test heavily on it by giving you a collateral mortgage document as one of the library documents and asking a lot of questions. So you can't ignore that part of Chapter 18. But at the same time, they occasionally don't even mention it at all, because it is not the most important aspect of a mortgage. In fact, the most important aspect of Chapter 18, which is all the mortgage chapter, is how it relates to all these conveyances that we're talking about in Chapter 21. And they really should kind of go together, and I'm not sure why Chapter 18 comes first. The financing comes before they even told you how you sell property, but that's how the study guide is laid out in an almost backwards way, and it's not news to anybody who's studying for this. But the good news is when you read Chapter 21 and see all these forms of conveyances, and you ask yourself, well, how are some of them financed? Then you could refer back to Chapter 18 and see the mortgage chapter.
So one way you can convey property without having to finance anything is an exchange. That's one of the conveyances mentioned, and that is kind of like you exchange one piece of property for another. They have to be similar in value, and they have to be similar types of property.
I think the most common way they test on this is that they give exchange as one of the options, but it's probably not the one they're testing on. It's a decoy because the word exchange sounds in common sense like, well, if I exchange money
Right.
for property, then I use an exchange. But in fact, if you're exchanging all of the money for the property, that's just a cash sale or an active sale. So exchange is a term of art that's used for swapping properties. And you could see that you might have a piece of land next door that would be useful to your neighbor, and they're willing to give up another part of their land to you to make it so that you wind up with both with square lots instead of weird shaped lots. And that kind of exchange of nearly equal properties is done in very much like an active sale. But instead of talking about a buyer and a seller, they say there's exchanger one and exchanger two. And the only reason they do that is so that there's a fixed terminology. Because think of it, each one is both a buyer and a seller. And if you called one a buyer, you get constantly confused as to, wait, you mean the buyer of property A or the seller of property A? So they call it exchanger one, exchanger two, or even exchanger A and exchanger B. And otherwise, it looks like an active sale, though with two property descriptions, two this, two everything, because they're basically swapping properties.
And something else that looks like an exchange but isn't is a dation in payment. That is a situation where someone owes someone money, certain amount of money that you know of, but they may have a piece of property or something else and they want to pay off that, and the two parties come to an agreement and say, we will extinguish your debt in exchange, that we use the word exchange, for this piece of property. And they will it's like an offer and compromise. In, if you know IRS speak, it's an offer and compromise.
Yeah, it's used a lot by banks who would otherwise are about to foreclose on you. And instead of going through the whole foreclosure procedure, which is expensive, they say, look, you still owe us, you're underwater by $40,000. We're about to foreclose because you haven't paid for 6 months. But if you're willing to just give us the property, we'll forgive all of the debt, and they may take a little bit of loss on that, but it might be worth it to them to for everybody, because let's see, the homeowner comes out of it without having been foreclosed on, which is better for the credit, and the bank comes out of it with a piece of property that they were going to be able to foreclose on, but maybe not quickly, and maybe having hire attorneys. So a lot of times the dation in payment is used as a deed in lieu of foreclosure. By the way, it says in the book dation in payment, but a lot of people just use the English term for it, giving in payment.
Right. And it's there are rules with it. The property has to be valued within, I don't know, 50 or something. I can't remember offhand of the amount of the payment, or it can be called back within a certain amount of time. The rules are all in the book. You can define that and make sure you know where that is on the day of the test.
And speaking of offhand, we wanted to emphasize that we're doing this informally and
Right.
promise you that if you take our class, it's more structured,
Right.
and we use PowerPoints, and it's a little bit more less chatty and a little more organized. In fact, probably 70% of the classes are lecture plus comments and questions from you, so lecture discussion, but it isn't as informal as this. We wanted to emphasize that. We're not just getting up there and winging it. However, today we are just winging it, and it looks like the connection's held long enough that we're not going to have to do a Zoom tomorrow, and it's going to be fine.
But we will be happy if you have any questions. Just put it on Facebook, on our Facebook page, and we will be happy to answer any questions you have.
Right.
Well,
we prefer that today at least that it be about this
about
topic.
Mortgages.
But ultimately,
we love answering the questions.
Yeah, we're kind of stupid that way. But what we would ask you to do is, if it's a question you think a lot of people would like to know the answer to, just post it as a question on the Children's Notary Facebook page, and let us answer for everybody. But if it truly is something that you don't want to share with everybody, there is
Yeah,
you could always use the DM, and
a lot
we'll
of times
look at
people
that.
have personal questions
Yeah,
that, issues that relate to them about mortgages or anything notary
yeah.
wise that,
And let me say two caveats there is we can't practice law. I'm not legally allowed to practice law in Louisiana at all. I'm a California attorney. But I can tell you that Michelle's not going to practice law across the internet. So don't ask us questions that essentially ask us to get legal advice because we can't do that. But secondly, at this point, our focus is on getting people to pass the exam.
mhm.
So I would love it if your questions were, even if they're personal or relate to a personal thing, kind of have to do with a question that might come up on the exam. But anyway,
Yeah,
ask whatever you want.
and we want everybody to be good notaries. We see a lot of bad notaries out there. So if it can make you a better notary, please ask. We'd be happy to answer whatever questions you have.
I see one of the commenters is Melanie Buffett. She is actually my co-teacher of the Tulane class, so I appreciate that she made it from Alabama. And if she has anything she wants to add to this, she can add it in comments. But at this point, we're going to mention a couple of more forms of conveyances, but we're fine with opening the floor to questions in the comment using the comment section.
Because that's all we know how to do at this point.
Yeah, I know there's supposed to be a chat function where things bubble, little bubbles come up, and we
Yeah,
can see them.
we're not
But
we're not
yeah.
there yet. So
So yeah, other than Melanie saying hi, which isn't a question, you should say hi. We're opening. You write any comment you want, and we'll try to answer it verbally.
I think the most tested thing will be the cash sale and the credit sale and the bond for deed and the quit claim.
Right. And they will definitely test the terminology, and they may use the term credit sale, or they could say owner finance sale, or sale with vendor's lien, or sale with vendor's privilege. All of those are the same thing and are different from a cash sale. Or what they may have should have put in Chapter 21 as a form of conveyance is cash sale with mortgage. But the reason they didn't do that is that doesn't convey, the only thing that conveys something is the cash sale part of it. But just understand that very often it's cash sale as financed by a mortgage.
What about a donation? Okay, so a donation in disguise. That's a good one. In Louisiana, the very first thing I learned in law school is you cannot sell your farm for $1. If you try and sell something for less than half of the value, if you try and
It's
pretend
actually not 2/3.
it's 2/3. Okay, so
Yeah.
if you try and sell something for less than what the value is, say you want to donate it, but you don't want it to be a donation. And the reason that they used to do this is because of forced heirship. Because before, forget, it was in the 90s at some point they changed the forced heirship laws. Everything used to be forced heirship. You could never have a child that wasn't a forced heir. And then they changed it where forced heirs became 24 years or younger. So people would try and donate property to get rid of it outside of forced heirship to exclude that property, and they would sell things for less than the value of what they were. That's a donation in disguise. And then you could collate it back into the heirs that wanted that property. Let's say they had a farm that was worth a lot of money, millions of dollars. They would collate it back into the estate. You've heard that term. You've seen it in the Green Book. Collation is a way that after you pass away, that the heirs can bring that property back into the estate. So that's where it came from. That's where the donation in disguise came from. Because people were trying to skirt around these rules, and it still happens. People try to do a sale that they want to skirt around tax laws, or they may owe money to for child support or something, so they want to sell something to someone, but it's not really a sale. They just don't want anybody to know about it.
Yeah, Deborah and Michelle are actually on the same page. She said now 23 and younger.
It's until
23
your 24th
until
birthday.
and 364 days and
Right.
11 hours and 23 hours and whatever. So
Until they hit their 24th
Right. When
birthday.
you're 24 and above, you're not a forced heir unless you're disabled. When you're under 24. So Deborah,
Yeah.
you're right about that. But think of it, don't say 23 and younger, because that sounds like if you're 23 and 6 months, you're not a forced heir, when really 23 up until midnight of your birthday, you're still a forced heir. Yeah. So one thing to mention about that is the way I think they would test donation in disguise is mostly about whether a document that purports to be a sale but doesn't have two witness lines on it is valid. And an argument is that it's not valid because it's really a donation, and a donation, as you know, of immovables has to be in an authentic act. Therefore, it has to have two witnesses. And I know that your experience might be that even a cash sale would have two witnesses, or a credit sale would have two witnesses. But technically, they don't have to. It's only a donation that has to, or a mortgage, but only a mortgage that contains certain clauses to it. So this is an area where I think a lot of people come in with a certain amount of experience, and the experience almost hurts you because the exam answer isn't the same as the practical answer. The practical answer is everybody who's worked in the mortgage industry would say, we always have two
Right.
witness lines on a mortgage. But it isn't legally required except if they have this special fast track foreclosure clause, confession of judgment. And of course, banks always demand that, always put it in the mortgage. So you'll never see in real life a mortgage without the two witness lines. But on the exam, they'll ask you, does this mortgage, and they'll give you a document that's a mortgage, require two witnesses lines? Or is it valid when it doesn't have two witness lines? And the only way you'll know that is to see whether there's a confession of judgment clause that's in the document they give you. And so that's the exam answer is, well, a mortgage may or may not have to be an authentic act. Well, a donation of an immovable does have to be an authentic act. A sale of an immovable has to be in writing, but technically doesn't have to be an authentic act. It often is. It's often notarized. It's very commonly treated as just as seriously. But for exam purposes, they're likely to give you a sale that doesn't have the two witness lines. And if it turns out it's not really a sale, it's a donation in disguise, you're supposed to answer that it's null, it's invalid.
Right. Because it can be, for legal purposes, not for exam purposes, it can be a valid sale, even though it fails as a donation. So it can still transfer the property one way, but not in the other way.
Yeah. And they're just, the way they're going to test you is the kind of the indirect way of saying, is this valid? As opposed to saying, did you have to have two witnesses here? But they'll give you a document or a scenario where there aren't two witnesses. And the is it valid question is a backdoor way of saying, is this something that's required to be an authentic act? Which you see from the list on 322 through 324 in the 2023 study guide. There you know the answer to what has to be authentic and what doesn't have to be authentic. Anyway, just wanted to mention that because I think that's the way it's tested the most. Another form of conveyance is a donation inter vivos. And they go ahead and mention it in the chapter on conveyances because they're making the list more complete. But the realistic thing to know is that chapter 10 is where all the donation stuff is talked about. So although there's some mention of donations, and especially the form you use, what an act of donation looks like, is in chapter 21, you'd want to cross-reference it to chapter 10 because that's where all the donation content, rules, and things are. So I wanted to mention that. I always add to the list donation mortis causa, which is a testament or will, because if you think about it, that's a form of conveyance. It's just a conveyance after you're dead. But I don't know why it's not mentioned in chapter 21 as a way to convey property, because that is probably the most inevitable way that you will convey property is through a will or through an estate or succession in some way. So again, I wanted to open up the floor to questions. I appreciate Melanie's input about relating this to donation in disguise because I think that's very testable. But yeah, there might be a few more questions. Well, until I see some of those, I guess I want to finish some of the ones that we did mention.
Sure. So, sale with the right of redemption is.
There's the French phrase for it.
Oh,
Vente à remer.
Yeah, vente à
And
remer.
it's got like accent marks going in the wrong direction in three different places.
He speaks Spanish.
But not French. She speaks French, which is what this is.
It is a sale in which and it doesn't have anything to do with mortgages, but in the sale document itself, the buyer, no, the seller has a right within, I think, a 10-year period to repurchase. It's like a right of first refusal almost. You have a right to repurchase the property back if the buyer decides to resell it.
If the seller decides to grab it back, claw it back, the original contract said that they could. So I don't know who really wants to buy a property where somebody could take it out from under them.
I could see if it was a family property, if the family had it in their estate for a long time, and they may have sold it to a third party for maybe they were in some kind of financial distress or something, and then they were anticipating. But if in that instance, you could put that clause in there saying before you sell it to anybody else, I want to have a shot at redeeming it from you. But that's only valid in the book. I think it says 10 years.
Yeah. They don't test on that much. The only time I think they would test on that is if they told you in a scenario that someone had a chance. They could say, because they could say as one of the choices, Vente or Romer, as opposed to a sale with right of redemption. So it is very much
Yes.
like the right of first
Yes.
refusal, but it's a little more technical and enforceable than a right of first refusal, because right of first refusal kind of implies that you're selling it and somebody can come in and have the first chance to buy it. This could be a situation where the original seller decides just to take it back, even though the buyer doesn't want to get rid of it. But it works like an act of, you can think of it as a right of first refusal, and that's not a problem. So either sale with right of redemption or vente a remer, and these terms are in chapter 21. So you'll study them, you'll find them, it won't be a problem. The only thing I think they might test on is when they tell you in a scenario what happened, one of the options might be vente a remer. They might say, is this a credit sale? Is this a cash sale? Is this a bond for deed? Is this a vente a remer? Almost always the vente a remer will not be one of the right choices.
Yeah, I
Yep.
can see that. I can see somebody.
Lee put in comments an example of how it could happen and why it might be advantageous for families that maybe have short-term financial problems, and like she said, has this estate that's been in there forever, and they want to have a chance to get it back because they're counting on making a lot of money in the long run or having money again somehow, probably through murder. That
I mean,
Yeah, they're counting on killing somebody in 5 years, and so we're going to want to buy the property, the South Fork, back. Maybe we watch too much Dateline. It's possible, but I don't think so. Yeah, so that was very helpful, Lee. Thank you. And are the French phrases on the test? Only if they're in the study guide. They expect you to know alternative phrase for things. They might say giving in payment, or they may say dation in payment. They may say, they may say they may say credit sale, or they might say owner finance sale of an immovable, and you're
And
supposed to know that's a credit
if they
sale.
use the terms interchangeably, I would know both terms.
Yeah, unfortunately, you don't have a choice but to memorize one half of the alternative expressions, and that's going to happen throughout the whole book for lots of different things. Unfortunately, they'll talk about second tier descendants, and that's really just grandchildren. So in a scenario, they might call them second class or second tier descendants, and then you're supposed to understand they're talking about grandchildren. It's one of the many ways that they test you on things that I think are unnecessarily complicated, but that's the way it is. So because of that, let me make a quick pitch for we starting a class July 11th, this Tuesday at 6.
Does not include murder.
Well, you don't know. If she winds up teaching the last 3 sessions and I just don't seem to be there anymore, call the cops. But by the way, that won't happen because she's watched so many Datelines that you won't know what happened. It will be an accident. It will. There's no chance that she will be blamed for it. She's taken notes. So in any event, so we're teaching this class. We hope that you'll look at our main website, which is notarysidepiece.com, and register for the class. You're welcome to join us. It's live every Tuesday night on Zoom, which is a really good platform, and it has a lot of ability to have people raise their hands and ask questions and all that. And then it's also recorded so that if you miss a class or even just prefer recordings, then those recordings will be there for you after class. So check out Childress. No, it's not that. Sorry, notarysidepiece.com or notary504.com or notary318.com, notary225.com. So that's my pitch for that. We'd love to teach you in the class. And I would say the biggest difference between our class and any other class is we will answer your questions. When you send us emails in the middle of the night, we probably stay up and answer them, but we certainly deal with them the next morning as soon as we can. So we welcome you to the class, the ones who've already registered, and hope that other peoples will consider it as well.
And we do have some nice exams that we will give you and some nice memos. So we'll do whatever we can to help.
Yeah, we're committed to just maximizing your chance to pass. And one of the ways we do that is to put you through 3 practice exams, which isn't fun, but you'd rather get the pain out of the way on the practice exercise than on the real thing. So that by the time you take the real exam, the format of the questions, the speed of the questions, the looking through the book for the answer will be very familiar to you and hopefully will maximize your chance of passing. So do you have any more substantive questions? We do have 10 minutes that we put aside.
Yeah, I'm not going to lie. Mortgages are not easy. There's some stuff in here that's complicated.
Yeah. They test on some real details of like what's in a collateral mortgage package and things of that
I know
sort.
you don't know what you don't know right now, but if there's anything that you're curious about mortgages, for example, they can apply to immovables and to
Actually,
interest in immovables.
yeah. So, and they test on that it doesn't apply to movables, even though I've heard all along there's such a thing as a chattel mortgage, a mortgage
Yeah,
on...
they don't really have that in Louisiana anymore. They've
Good,
replaced
'cause-
that with the UCC.
Okay, so the exam answer is that a mortgage has to apply to an immovable. But as you pointed out, that could also be an interest in an immovable, like a usufruct. You can take out a mortgage on a usufruct because it's an interest in an immovable.
Correct. The 4 components of the collateral mortgage, I'm going to have to look up. And I know that 2 of them can be combined.
Yeah, sometimes they combine it into one or more, fewer than 4 documents. But yeah, the collateral mortgage package, unlike the conventional mortgage, which is just, I promise to pay you back, you give me the money now so I can buy the house. Since the collateral mortgage has this future aspect that you could take out money in the future based on the original mortgage, it comes, here it is. Here it comes down to 4 different components, which are complicated.
Okay, so the collateral mortgage.
And don't freak if you haven't read all of this and this is just making you crazy. But
So the collateral mortgage is going to be one big piece of paper. It's going to be a long, probably legal size piece of paper, and it says, "We lending institution is going to lend John Smith $10 million." That's the big collateral mortgage, and then there's going to be a collateral mortgage note, and that's going to be each. It's going to be like a little mini mortgage for each piece of property that's going to be purchased.
And sometimes in the book referred to as the ne veriture note, because ne veriture is a French term for the paraph that you connect the mortgage and this note to the regular mortgage. So the lawyers call it the ne veriture note instead of the collateral mortgage note.
And then there's a what the book calls a hand note. I was going to do this one. Hand note. That's a promissory note. That's what the buyer of the piece of property signs and says, "I hereby promise to pay back." So he got a $10 million big package, and the lender says, "I will loan you up to $10 million for your business venture, for all the pieces of property that you're buying, or all the investment property that you're buying." And then and he says, "I want to buy a house for $100,000, and there's going to be a little mini mortgage for that, the collateral mortgage note, and then there's going to be the promissory note that he's going to sign. That's the hand note or the promissory note, and he's going to sign that, and he's going to say, "I promise to pay back $100,000." And then there's a security
Well,
agreement.
let me finish with that. The hand note is the closest thing to a blank check.
Mm-hmm.
So the bank or the lender holds on to it. So when they're ready to basically collect on it, they've already kind of gotten a blank check written for them. That it's in hand, and I think that's where the term comes from.
And then there's also a UCC 9 security agreement. So across all banking institutions, they use those.
So remember when you buy furniture at Rooms to Go or a car that they make you sign this long lending agreement that I'm financing it, I'm signing this, I agree to make monthly payments. That is actually, and it's usually on carbon paper, and it used to be at least. So there's
NCR paper, no
yeah,
carbon
it's
required.
right, exactly. This long thing, that is a UCC 9 security agreement. And you think of it as usually reserved to cars and furniture and the like. But as part of the collateral mortgage package, it is the kind of the financing document that the reason it applies to the collateral mortgage note is that the collateral mortgage note is a movable. So even though the collateral mortgage is taken out on a piece of big property that is immovable, or land, or something of that sort, movables include things like security certificates of deposit and things that are finance structures. So the security agreement is kind of financing the collateral mortgage note. Anyway, all of this is premature for people who haven't studied any of this part of the book yet. We just wanted to introduce it to you to tell you that it can be deciphered, that there is a kind of a relationship between 18 and 20, chapters 18 and 21 in the book. And it's almost better to read chapter 21 first and then go back and learn the details of financing conveyances by reading chapter 18 after that. That's what this introduction was, and we
It's
hope that it was useful to
it's
you.
complex. The collateral mortgage is very complex.
Yeah, again, usually they don't test on it, and when they do, you can probably figure out that it is a collateral mortgage rather than a conventional mortgage because it has the option of future money. I can take out more money in the future. The bank can sign out a promissory note and give me some new money based on an old mortgage, an original mortgage. Then to identify that as collateral mortgage is the key thing they would test
And there'll
on.
be a UCC document attached to it.
Right. Or they may show a promissory note as one of the library documents, and you're supposed to know what a promissory note is and how it's part of a financing arrangement. The first component is the collateral mortgage itself, just what looks like the regular mortgage, the conventional mortgage, except it has clauses in there that talk about future debt. The second component is the collateral mortgage note, often called, it's a form of promissory note itself, often called the ne veritur note. The third component is the UCC 9 security agreement. It used to be pledge in Louisiana, but about 15, 20 years ago was replaced by the UCC 9 security agreement as we got more and more into the UCC, Uniform Commercial Code. The UCC 9 document is the financing agreement that is attached to a regular mortgage that turns it into a collateral mortgage, or is part of it being a collateral mortgage. So just like you would take out a UCC 9 agreement or sign a UCC 9 agreement to get furniture or a car, if you're going to do a collateral mortgage, you have to do that as well because you're essentially financing the collateral mortgage note through an agreement to repay. And then the fourth component is another kind of promissory note called the hand note, sometimes just called the promissory note, but of course the collateral mortgage note is also a form of promissory note. Julie has helpfully said that UCC 9 is explained on 278 to 279 of the Green Study Guide. I appreciate that. Well, we're running up towards the end of time, but we still have a minute or two to answer any further questions you guys have. Well, again, we invite you to ask the questions outside of the contours of this little session. We apologize for the tech issues and promise that they won't be a real problem in the long run. But we hope that you enjoyed this, and we enjoy doing it. Okay, guys, we're gonna figure out how to hang up in such a way that it saves it.
Yeah.
I think if we press in live video, it will give us the option
Fingers crossed.
of
And
it becoming recorded.
If you have any questions, give us a shout out on Facebook, and we'll be happy to answer them.
All right.
All right, and okay, we'll be able to.